My name is Brad, 32, living a carefully built life in Phoenix. I've always been the responsible one, while my sister Jessica floated through life on my parents' generosity. Despite our strained relationship, my family insists we stick together, a phrase that's cost me thousands. That Tuesday, her text seemed innocent, until those words appeared, "I need a new car, you'll co-sign, right?" My two-word reply unleashed a family war I never saw coming. Before I dive into how my family nearly imploded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe if you've ever had to stand your ground against family pressure. Growing up in our middle-class suburban Chicago home, the differences in how my parents treated Jessica and me were impossible to miss. 7 years, my junior Jessica was the unexpected blessing, the baby girl who could do no wrong. While my childhood consisted of strict curfews, mandatory chores, and consequences for every misstep, Jessica seemed to exist in an alternate universe where rules bent around her like light around a black hole. By 16, I was working weekends at the local hardware store, saving for college, and learning the value of $1. My father, a successful commercial real estate broker, could have easily covered my education, but he insisted I develop character and work ethic. I worked 30 hours a week through college, took out modest loans, and graduated with a computer science degree that I paid for mostly myself. Jessica's path couldn't have been more different. Her high school years were a blur of missed curfews, ignored chores, and tantrums that somehow always resulted in her getting what she wanted. When she crashed her first car, a 16th birthday gift nicer than anything I'd ever owned, my parents replaced it within a week. No consequences, no discussions about responsibility. "She's sensitive," my mother would explain in hushed tones when I questioned the double standard. "Not everyone can be as naturally responsible as you, Brad." That phrase, naturally responsible, became both my identity and my prison. Being the responsible one meant I was expected to help pick up the pieces whenever Jessica's life fell apart, which happened with alarming regularity. After high school, Jessica attempted college 3 separate times, dropping out each time when courses became too stressful or professors were totally unfair. My parents funded each attempt, paying for abandoned apartments, unused textbooks, and the therapy sessions Jessica needed to process these failures. Meanwhile, I had built a solid career as a software engineer, steadily climbing the ladder at a respected tech company. 5 years ago, I made my first major financial mistake, co-signing on a car loan for Jessica. She had just started a job as a receptionist, her first real career opportunity my mother had emphasized, and needed reliable transportation. Against my better judgment and financial advisor's explicit advice, I signed the papers. 6 months later, Jessica quit the job because her boss was toxic. 3 months after that, she stopped making car payments altogether. By the time I discovered this, my credit score had dropped 80 points, and I was forced to pay off the remaining $14,000 to avoid further damage. Jessica promised to pay me back when things stabilize. I'm still waiting. Now at 25, Jessica worked part-time at an upscale boutique, a job she frequently complained about but never quite hated enough to leave. She lived in an apartment that my parents subsidized, drove a car they helped maintain, and seemed perpetually one crisis away from financial collapse. My father's business success had taught him that money could solve most problems. Throughout our childhood, his method of parenting often involved throwing cash at issues rather than addressing their root causes. A bad grade could be fixed with an expensive tutor. A behavioral problem warranted the finest therapist. Jessica's continued irresponsibility was met with more financial support, not more accountability. My mother, though loving, played a passive role in family conflicts. She preferred peace at any cost, even if that cost was enabling destructive patterns. Family harmony was her North Star, and she'd sacrifice almost anything to maintain the appearance of it. Our Sunday family dinners had become a masterclass in surface-level pleasantries covering simmering resentments. We'd gather around my parents' mahogany dining table, pass dishes of my mother's home cooking, and engage in carefully scripted conversations that avoided anything remotely controversial. "How's work, Brad?" my father would ask, not really listening to my answer. "The boutique is considering me for assistant manager," Jessica would announce, though she'd been saying this for nearly a year. I'd bite my tongue, smile, and compliment the pot roast. 6 months ago, after a particularly difficult conversation with my financial advisor about retirement planning, I made a decision that sent ripples through our family dynamic. I stopped providing financial assistance to Jessica. No more temporary loans that were never repaid. No more covering her portion of birthday gifts for our parents. No more emergency cash transfers when she'd overspent her budget on clothes or concert tickets. The change was immediately felt. At Sunday dinners, my parents' smiles seemed a little tighter. Jessica's tone a little colder. I was still family, but I'd violated an unspoken rule. The responsible one takes care of the irresponsible one, no questions asked. Meanwhile, my own life was finally taking shape the way I'd always hoped. After years of careful saving and investment, I had purchased a modest 3-bedroom home in a nice Phoenix neighborhood. My career was thriving with a recent promotion to senior developer that came with a substantial raise. I was dating Allison, a pediatric nurse, with a pragmatic approach to life that matched my own. For the first time, I felt I was building something sustainable, something that belonged entirely to me. Which is exactly when Jessica began dropping hints about needing a reliable car for work. "The boutique is giving me more hours," she mentioned at a recent Sunday dinner. "I need to be able to get there on time, you know. Especially if I want that assistant manager position." My father nodded approvingly. Reliable transportation is essential for career advancement. I felt their eyes on me, waiting for me to offer assistance. Instead, I asked about the dessert. Later that week, I confided in Allison about the mounting pressure. We were having dinner at my place, a simple meal of grilled chicken and vegetables on my back patio. "You know, they're setting you up, right?" she said, her directness. "One of the qualities I appreciated most about her, they're laying the groundwork to ask you for something." I know, I sighed. "But I've finally gotten to a good place financially. I can't keep setting myself on fire to keep Jessica warm." Allison reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Boundaries aren't just good for you. They're actually good for Jessica too. Even if none of them can see that yet." I nodded, trying to believe it. Little did I know how severely those boundaries would soon be tested. The day that everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I woke at 6, went for my morning run around the neighborhood, showered, and made my usual breakfast of eggs and toast. By 8, I was at my desk in my home office, logging into the company server and reviewing the code I needed to finish for an important project deadline that afternoon. The first text from Jessica came at 11:27, innocuous enough to not immediately raise alarms. "Hey big bro, how's your day going, Guadija?" I was deep in debugging a particularly stubborn piece of code and responded briefly, "Busy. Project deadline today." Her response came quickly, as if she'd been waiting with phone in hand. "Exciting news, I found the perfect car." I felt a twinge of apprehension, but continued working, hoping this wouldn't go where I suspected it might. 3 more texts followed in rapid succession. "It's a Mercedes GLA 250, the cutest compact SUV ever. Only $35,000. Such a good deal for a Mercedes. The dealer needs a cosigner since my credit isn't great. You'll do it right. I need to finalize today." I stared at my phone, a familiar mixture of disbelief and frustration washing over me. The Mercedes GLA 250 was not just a car. It was a luxury vehicle that cost more than most people made in a year. With Jessica's part-time retail salary, the monthly payments would be completely unsustainable, even if she managed to keep the job longer than her usual 6-month maximum. More importantly, I flashed back to the aftermath of the last car loan. The endless calls from the lender. The damage to my credit score that took years to repair. The arguments when I asked Jessica about missed payments. The stress that affected my work, my sleep, my relationships. Without hesitation, I typed back 2 words and hit send. "Dream on." For about 15 minutes, there was silence. I returned to my code, thinking perhaps the directness of my response had made an impact. Perhaps Jessica had finally recognized the absurdity of her request. Perhaps she'd moved on to our parents, her usual backup plan when I refused to cooperate. At 11:52, my phone began vibrating continuously. First came Jessica's responses. "Wow. Really, that's all you have to say? I need this car for work, Brad. Don't be so selfish. After everything this family has done for you, Then, before I could even process her reaction, came text from my mother. "Bradley, please call your sister. She's very upset. Family helps family. We've always taught you that. Your father and I are very disappointed in your attitude." I put my phone down, my concentration completely broken. How had this escalated so quickly? It was almost as if they'd been waiting, phones in hand, for my response. As if. The realization hit me just as my father's text arrived, all capital letters, his digital version of shouting, "Refuse," and "You're cut off from family events." They had planned this. This wasn't a spontaneous request from Jessica. This was a coordinated effort. They had discussed this, strategized this, perhaps even rehearsed this. While I'd been working and building my life, they'd been plotting to use me as their financial safety net yet again. Within minutes, the family group chat exploded. "Jessica, Brad refuses to help me with transportation. I need for work. Mom, Bradley, we raised you better than this. Dad, after all we've sacrificed for your education and success. Jessica, he doesn't care if I lose my job. Mom, we're a family. We support each other. Dad, very disappointed, son. Very disappointed." I stared at my phone in shock, watching the messages pile up. It was as if I'd entered an alternate reality where my setting a basic financial boundary was equivalent to committing a heinous crime against my family. My phone rang, Allison calling for our planned lunch check-in. I answered, my voice strained. "Hey," I managed. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately picking up on my tone. "My family has lost their collective minds," I said, and gave her a quick summary of the situation. "Wow," she breathed. "That's intense. What are you going to do?" "Right now, nothing," I decided. "I need to finish this project, and I can't think clearly when I'm this angry. I'll deal with them later." "Good call," she agreed. "Want me to bring dinner over tonight so we can talk it through?" I accepted gratefully, then put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and forced myself to focus on work for the next several hours. The project deadline couldn't be moved, family drama or not. It wasn't until later, when I took a break to grab a late lunch, that I checked my messages again and discovered something that turned my anger to ice-cold fury. My cousin Tyler, who worked at the same dealership where Jessica was shopping, had sent me a private message. "Hey Brad, thought you should know Jessica and your parents have been coming in for the past 2 weeks test driving that Mercedes. They've been telling everyone you agreed to co-sign. They even had the finance guy run your credit. Just seemed shady, so I wanted to give you a heads up. They hadn't just planned to ask me today. They had been operating on the assumption that I would say yes, or that they could pressure me into compliance for weeks. They had discussed my finances with strangers. They had authorized a credit check without my knowledge. This wasn't just boundary crossing anymore. This was potentially fraud." With shaking hands, I texted Tyler back, thanking him for the information and asking him to let me know if they returned to the dealership. Then I went back to work, a sense of resolve hardening within me. This would be the last time my family tried to take advantage of my natural responsibility. After finally submitting my project just before the 5 o'clock deadline, I sat back in my office chair, mentally exhausted but determined to understand the full scope of what my family had tried to do. The unauthorized credit check Tyler had mentioned was concerning enough to warrant further investigation. I opened my laptop and logged into the credit monitoring service I'd subscribed to after the last car loan fiasco with Jessica. The dashboard showed a recent hard inquiry from the Mercedes dealership, confirming Tyler's information, but also revealed something I hadn't expected. 3 other inquiries from different financial institutions over the past month. "What the hell?" I muttered, clicking through to see the details. The inquiries had come from a local credit union, a major bank, and a financial services company known for high-interest loans to people with poor credit. Each was dated within the last 3 weeks. Each had been made without my knowledge or consent. As I dug deeper, a notification I'd previously overlooked caught my attention. There had been unusual activity on a joint credit line I'd nearly forgotten about, one I'd opened with my parents years ago when I first moved to Phoenix and was establishing my credit. It was supposed to be for emergencies only, and to my knowledge it had never been used. Until now. The credit line showed recent checks of available balance and several attempted transactions that had been flagged by the fraud department and declined. Someone had been testing the waters, seeing if they could access those funds without my knowledge. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone and called my bank's customer service line. After authenticating my identity, I explained my concerns to the representative. "Yes, Mr. Reynolds. I can see several attempted withdrawals from your joint line of credit over the past 2 weeks," the customer service representative confirmed. "They were flagged because they didn't match your usual spending patterns and were made from a location in Chicago, while our records show you reside in Phoenix." Chicago, where my parents and Jessica lived. "Were any of these transactions successful?" I asked, dreading the answer. "No, sir. Our fraud prevention system declined them pending verification, but no one responded to our verification attempts." Relief washed over me quickly, followed by a new wave of anger. They hadn't just planned to use my credit for a car loan. They had actively tried to access my existing credit without my knowledge. "There's something else you should know," the representative continued. "There were 3 attempts to add an authorized user to this account in the past month. The requests were submitted online using your login credentials, but our system flagged them for verification due to the new user having a different address. Again, no one responded to our verification attempts." I closed my eyes, trying to process this information. The name on those requests, was it Jessica Reynolds? A pause. "Yes, that's correct. Do you know this person?" "She's my sister," I replied, my voice flat. "And I did not authorize her to be added to my account." After placing additional security measures on all my accounts and scheduling a meeting with the fraud department the following day, I ended the call and sat in stunned silence. This wasn't just my family pressuring me to co-sign a loan. This was a coordinated attempt to gain access to my credit without my consent. This was my sister and parents conspiring to commit financial fraud. How had Jessica gotten my login credentials? How long had this been going on? What else might they have accessed that I didn't know about yet? I was still sitting there trying to process these questions when Allison arrived with dinner takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. One look at my face told her something was very wrong. "What happened?" she asked, setting the food on the coffee table and sitting beside me on the couch. I told her everything: the multiple credit inquiries, the attempted transactions, the efforts to add Jessica as an authorized user on my accounts. "Brad, this is serious," she said when I finished. "This isn't just family overstepping boundaries. This is identity theft. This is fraud." "They're my family," I said weakly, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Family doesn't commit crimes against each other," Allison replied firmly. "My brothers and I disagree about plenty, but we don't steal from each other. We don't try to destroy each other's financial futures." She was right, and I knew it. In my family's world, Jessica's needs, or wants more accurately, had always trumped everything else, including legality, respect, and basic decency. I had spent my life accommodating this dynamic, making excuses, cleaning up messes. But this was different. This crossed a line I couldn't ignore. "What do?" I asked, the question directed as much to myself as to Allison. "First, you protect yourself," she said without hesitation. "Lock down your credit change, all your passwords, document everything. Then you decide what kind of relationship you want with people who would do this to you." The next morning I called into work and requested a personal day, then made an appointment with my financial advisor. Roger had been managing my investments for 5 years and had warned me repeatedly about entangling my finances with my family's. "I hate to say I told you so," Roger said after I explained the situation, "but I've been concerned about this possibility for years." "What are my options?" I asked. "Legally, you could file a police report for identity theft and fraud. That would likely result in criminal charges against your sister and possibly your parents." I winced at the thought. "Alternatively," Roger continued, "you can take immediate steps to protect your financial identity without involving law enforcement. Cancel all joint accounts. Place fraud alerts and credit freezes. Change all passwords. And make it clear to your family that any further attempts to access your finances will result in legal action. And the dealership that ran my credit without authorization, we can file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What they did was illegal." After 2 hours of reviewing all my accounts and creating an action plan, I left Roger's office with a clear sense of what needed to be done. I spent the rest of the day making calls, changing passwords, and documenting every unauthorized attempt to access my finances. By late afternoon, I had compiled a disturbing picture of my family's activities. Not only had they attempted to access my credit line and add Jessica as an authorized user, but I discovered they had also used my email address to receive price quotes from multiple dealerships, attempted to open a store credit card using my information at a furniture store, inquired about refinancing options for my mortgage, which would have required my signature, used my phone number as a contact for Jessica's rental application. Each discovery felt like another betrayal, another confirmation that my family viewed me not as a person with my own life and boundaries, but as a resource to be exploited. That evening, I sat down at my computer and drafted an email to my parents and Jessica. I tried several versions ranging from rage-filled accusations to cold legal threats before settling on something direct but controlled. I have discovered multiple unauthorized attempts to access my financial accounts, use my credit, and leverage my identity for loans and applications. I have documented all of these attempts and taken steps to secure my finances. Effective immediately, I am canceling all shared accounts and credit lines. Any further attempts to use my financial information without explicit consent will result in legal action. I am deeply hurt by this breach of trust and need time to consider what kind of relationship we can have moving forward. My finger hovered over the send button for several long moments before I finally clicked it. Then I turned off my phone knowing the firestorm that would follow and prepared for the most important call of the day to the bank to cancel the shared credit line that they had attempted to exploit. The customer service representative who answered my call to the bank's after-hours line could tell from my voice that this was no routine inquiry. "I need to cancel a joint credit line immediately," I said, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil roiling beneath the surface. "I can certainly help you with that, sir," she replied. "May I ask the reason for cancellation? This information helps us improve our services." I hesitated, then decided honesty was best. Unauthorized access attempts by the other parties on the account. This triggered a transfer to the fraud department where I spent 45 minutes detailing the multiple attempts to access the credit line without my knowledge. The fraud specialist, a woman named Monica with a calm, experienced voice, asked detailed questions about the attempts when I had discovered them and whether I had confronted the other parties. "Not yet," I admitted. "I wanted to secure everything first." "That's wise," Monica assured me. "We recommend securing all financial accounts before confrontation in these situations. Family financial fraud is unfortunately common, and confrontations can sometimes lead to escalation of attempts before accounts can be properly secured." Family financial fraud. Hearing it described so clinically made it both more real and more painful. This wasn't just a family disagreement or a boundary issue. It had a name, a category. It was a recognized form of fraud. By the end of the call, I had canceled the joint credit line completely, placed fraud alerts on all my accounts, requested new card numbers for all my credit cards, enrolled in enhanced security monitoring, changed all my online banking passwords and security questions. "Is there anything else I should be doing?" I asked before ending the call. "You might consider filing a police report," Monica suggested. "Even if you don't wish to press charges against family members, having an official report can help protect you if there are future attempts or disputes." I thanked her but wasn't ready to take that step. Despite everything, the thought of my sister or parents being questioned by police made me physically ill. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began drafting a detailed email to my family. This would be separate from the brief notification I'd sent earlier. This would be a full accounting of what I knew, how I felt, and what needed to change. I wrote and rewrote for over an hour, trying to find the right balance between firmness and compassion, between protecting myself and leaving the door open for healing. The final version read, "Dad, Mom, Jessica, I've discovered the full extent of what's been happening with my financial information, and I'm writing this email to make absolutely clear where things stand. Over the past month, the following has occurred without my knowledge or consent. Multiple credit checks from car dealerships and financial institutions, attempts to add Jessica as an authorized user on my accounts, attempts to withdraw funds from my credit line, use of my contact information for applications and quotes. I've now taken steps to secure all my accounts, including canceling our shared credit line and placing fraud alerts on my credit report. Any further attempts to access my finances will be documented and could result in legal consequences that none of us want. I'm struggling to express how deeply hurt I am by these actions. For years, I've tried to be supportive while maintaining reasonable boundaries. I've helped when I could and been honest when I couldn't. In return, you've gone behind my back, potentially committed fraud, and certainly violated my trust in profound ways. I need time and space to process this betrayal. Please do not come to my home unannounced. Please do not call my workplace. I will reach out when I'm ready to discuss this further. If you need to communicate with me urgently, please do so by email only for the time being. Brad. I hit send, then immediately turned off my phone. I knew the responses would come fast and furious, and I needed at least one night of peace before facing the storm. That night was anything but peaceful. I lay awake for hours, my mind replaying moments from throughout my life. Moments when I'd felt used, taken for granted, manipulated by the people who were supposed to love me most. I remembered my 16th birthday when my parents gave Jessica a new bike because she'd thrown a tantrum about feeling left out. I remembered working double shifts during college while they paid for Jessica's spring break trip because she needed the experience. I remembered co-signing that first car loan against my better judgment because family helps family. Around 3 in the morning, Allison called, unable to reach me on my phone. I answered my apartment phone on the second ring. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I've been texting you for hours." I turned off my phone, I explained, then filled her in on everything I'd done. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "I know how hard this island. I keep wondering if I'm overreacting," I confessed. "They're my family." "Brad, listen to me," Allison said, her voice firm but gentle. "What they tried to do was illegal. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a boundary issue. They tried to commit fraud using your information. They tried to steal from you. The fact that they're family makes it worse, not better." We talked until nearly 4, her steady presence, a lifeline in the churning sea of emotions. When we finally hung up, I felt stronger, more certain of my course. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said before we disconnected, "remember that you deserve relationships based on respect, not exploitation." I fell into a fitful sleep shortly after and woke at 7 to the sound of my apartment phone ringing again. Groggy and disoriented, I answered without thinking. "Hello." Bradley Alexander Reynolds. My father's voice cold and controlled. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I hung up without responding and unplugged the landline. Then, bracing myself, I turned on my cell phone. The screen immediately lit up with notifications: 36 missed calls, 53 text messages, 17 voicemails, and 29 email notifications, the digital equivalent of a siege. I didn't read or listen to any of them. Instead, I sent a quick text to my boss explaining I needed another personal day to deal with a family emergency. Then made a cup of coffee and tried to prepare myself for whatever came next. I didn't have to wait long. At 9:15, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole to see my Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, standing on my front step. Of all the family members who might show up, he was perhaps the least expected. Uncle Robert and my father had a complicated relationship. They had worked together in the real estate business for years before a falling out led Robert to start his own company. We hadn't seen much of him at family gatherings in recent years, though he always sent birthday and Christmas cards. I opened the door cautiously. "Uncle Robert." "This is unexpected." He looked tired, his normally immaculate appearance slightly rumpled as if he'd been driving for hours. "May I come in, Brad? There are some things you need to know." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. As he walked past me into the living room, he said something that immediately caught my attention. "I went through something similar with your father 20 years ago. I thought it was time someone finally broke the cycle." Uncle Robert declined my offer of coffee, opting instead for water as we sat in my living room. He looked around approvingly at my modest but well-maintained home. "You've done well for yourself, Brad. Built something solid. I'm not surprised." "Thank you," I said, still wary about his unexpected appearance. "You mentioned a cycle." He nodded, taking a sip of water before setting the glass down carefully on a coaster. "Your father and we grew up in a household where financial exploitation was normalized. Our father, your grandfather, would regularly use one family member's resources to bail out another, usually himself. This was surprising. My grandfather had died when I was young, and my father rarely spoke about his childhood. When your father and I started our business together, Uncle Robert continued. Things went well at first. Then he started using company funds to cover personal expenses. When I confronted him, he gave me the same line you've probably heard 1,000 times, "Family helps family." I nodded, the phrase all too familiar. Eventually, I discovered he'd taken out loans in the company's name and mine without my knowledge. Sound familiar? "Very," I said quietly. I left the business, cut financial ties, and we barely spoke for years. Uncle Robert leaned forward. "Brad, I came here because your mother called my wife in tears last night, and I recognized the pattern immediately. The entitlement, the manipulation, the guilt tactics. Why are they doing this now?" I asked. "They've always pushed boundaries, but this is different. This island." Desperate Uncle Robert finished for me. "And that's what I came to tell you. Your father's business is failing. He's overextended, made some bad investments, and has significant debt. He's been keeping up appearances, but they're months away from losing everything." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. And Jessica's role in all this? From what I gather, she has her own financial problems. Gambling debts, primarily. Your father's been covering them, which has only accelerated his financial decline. Suddenly, the coordinated effort to access my finances made terrible sense. They weren't just trying to get a car for Jessica. They were desperately searching for financial lifelines as their situation deteriorated. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "I still have contacts in the industry. Word gets around when someone's in trouble. Plus, your mother shared more than she probably intended during her call with my wife." He paused. "There's more. They're on their way here." "What now?" Uncle Robert nodded. "They left Chicago last night, driving straight through. I came to warn you, and to offer support if you want it. Or I can leave before they arrive, your choice." I considered for a moment. "Stay, please. I could use an ally." We spent the next hour preparing for their arrival. Uncle Robert helped me gather documentation of the unauthorized access attempts and advised me on how to maintain firm boundaries during what would likely be an emotionally charged confrontation. At 11:30, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and opened the door to find my father, mother, and Jessica standing on my doorstep, looking tired and travel-worn, but also determined. "Bradley," my father began, then stopped when he spotted Uncle Robert standing behind me. "Robert, what are you doing here?" "Supporting my nephew," Uncle Robert replied calmly. "Come in. We have a lot to discuss." They filed into my living room, Jessica shooting me a venomous look as she passed. My mother looked like she'd been crying, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. My father's face was a mask of controlled anger. "You've canceled our emergency credit line," my father said without preamble once everyone was seated. "That was completely unnecessary and frankly selfish." "Unnecessary," I repeated, struggling to keep my voice level. "You tried to access it without my knowledge multiple times. You attempted to add Jessica as an authorized user using my login credentials. That's fraud, Dad." "We were going to tell you," Jessica interjected. "We just needed to solve a temporary cash flow problem." "By stealing from me?" I asked. "It's not stealing when it's family," my mother said softly. "We've always helped each other." "No," I corrected her. "I've always helped you. And when have any of you ever helped me?" "When I needed a co-signer for my mortgage. Dad said I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. When I worked 30-hour weeks during college, none of you offered assistance. The support in this family has only ever flowed in one direction." "That's not fair," my father began, but Uncle Robert cut him off. "It's completely fair, and you know it, Thomas. You've been doing to Brad exactly what Dad did to us, using him as your personal financial safety net without any regard for his own needs or future. My father's face reddened. This is none of your business, Robert. You made it my business when you dragged your son into your financial problems. Uncle Robert's voice remained calm. Just like you did with your business partner me 20 years ago. A tense silence filled the room. My mother looked back and forth between the brothers, clearly uncomfortable with this public airing of family history. We're getting off track, Jessica finally said. The point is, Brad, I need that car for work. And the down payment. The point I interrupted is that you tried to commit fraud. All of you. And now you're here acting like I'm the one who's done something wrong by protecting myself. Your sister needs transportation, my father insisted. Her job depends on it. Then she can buy a used car within her budget like millions of other people do, I replied. Or take public transportation. Or carpool. What she cannot do is destroy my credit and financial future for a luxury vehicle she can't afford. It's not just about the car, my mother admitted, quietly glancing nervously at my father. We're having some financial difficulties. I know, I said. Uncle Robert told me. My father's head snapped toward Uncle Robert. You had no right. He had every right to warn me that you're trying to use me to bail out your failing business and Jessica's gambling debts, I said. Jessica gasped. How did you? It doesn't matter how I know I cut her off. What matters is that none of you were honest with me. You tried to manipulate and deceive me, instead of simply asking for help. Would you have helped if we'd asked, my father challenged? I considered the question seriously. I don't know. It would have depended on the terms, on seeing a real plan for change, on genuine accountability. But we'll never know, because you chose deception instead of honesty. So what now, my mother asked, her voice small. Are you really going to abandon your family when we need you most? The guilt tactic was so transparent, so familiar that I almost laughed. Instead, I took a deep breath and laid out my terms. I'm willing to have a relationship with all of you, but only on new terms. First, complete financial separation. No shared accounts, no loans, no co-signing. Second, Jessica needs professional help for her gambling problem. Real help, not just Dad bailing her out. Third, all of you need to acknowledge what you tried to do and apologize not just to me but to each other for the unhealthy dynamics we've created. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face had gone from red to purple. That's your ultimatum, he finally said. After everything we've done for you, it's not an ultimatum, I corrected him. It's a boundary. You're free to accept it or not. My father stood abruptly. I will not be dictated to by my own son. Come on, Eleanor, Jessica. We're leaving. My mother hesitated, looking torn. Thomas, maybe we should. Now, Eleanor, my father repeated firmly. My mother rose reluctantly, her eyes meeting mine with a mix of sadness and something else, perhaps a glimmer of understanding. Jessica followed without looking at me. At the door, my father turned back. When you come to your senses and remember the meaning of family, you know where to find us. I know exactly what family means, I replied quietly. That's why I'm doing this. The door closed behind them with a final sounding click, leaving Uncle Robert and me in silence. You did well, he said after a moment. Better than I did the first time I confronted him. It doesn't feel like a victory, I admitted. It's not, he agreed. But it is the beginning of something healthier, even if it doesn't seem that way right now. After Uncle Robert left promising to stay in touch, I called Allison and recounted the confrontation. Her support was unwavering. I'm sorry it went that way, she said. But I'm not surprised. Real change is hard, and they're not ready to do that work yet. What if they never are? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Then you build a family of choice, she replied simply. With people who respect you and love you for who you are, not what you can give them. That night, for the first time in years, I slept deeply, and without interruption. The weight of being the family's perpetual safety net had lifted, replaced by something unfamiliar but welcomed the lightness of being responsible only for my own life and choices. The 2 weeks following the confrontation passed in a strange, unsettling silence. No calls, no texts, no emails from my parents or Jessica. For someone who had spent his entire life managing family crises, the quiet was both liberating and disorienting. I returned to work, explained to my boss that I'd had a family emergency that was now resolved, and threw myself into coding with renewed focus. In the evenings, I spent time with Allison, or caught up with friends I'd neglected during years of prioritizing family demands. Meanwhile, the family rumor mill was working overtime. Distant cousins, aunts, and uncles began reaching out, some with concern, others with judgment, all with curiosity about what they'd heard described as my abandonment of the family in their time of need. Most surprising were the messages of support that came from unexpected quarters. My cousin Megan, who I'd always thought was firmly in Jessica's camp, sent a thoughtful email. "I've watched this pattern with Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Thomas for years. The way they elevate Jessica's needs above everyone else's isn't healthy for anyone. Not for you, not for the extended family, and honestly not for Jessica either. Stay strong. Some of us understand what you're doing, and why." Uncle Robert called regularly to check in and to share updates from his contacts in Chicago's real estate world. According to him, my father was scrambling to restructure his business debt and had approached several former colleagues for loans. "He's burning bridges," Uncle Robert reported. "People who've known him for decades are starting to see the pattern you've lived with your whole life." I worked with a financial advisor to create a comprehensive plan to secure my financial future, including additional identity theft protection and a complete separation of any accounts that might have connections to my family. I also consulted with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics, trying to understand how I'd become so entangled in my family's unhealthy patterns and how to establish healthier relationships moving forward. The role of family fixer, or financial savior, is often assigned early in childhood, Dr. Harper explained during our second session. It becomes part of your identity, making it extremely difficult to break the pattern without feeling like you're betraying not just your family but yourself. His words resonated deeply. My entire sense of worth had been tied to being the responsible one, the one who could be counted on, the one who sacrificed for others. Learning to define myself differently would take time and conscious effort. The most difficult adjustment was Sunday evenings. For years, no matter what else was happening in my life, Sundays meant family dinner at my parents' house. Now those hours stretched before me, empty and strange. Allison, perceptive, as always, suggested we create new Sunday traditions. Sometimes we cooked elaborate meals together. Other times, we joined friends for game nights or movie marathons. Gradually, Sunday began to transform from a day of obligation to one of genuine connection and enjoyment. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received my first communication from my mother, a brief text that simply read, "Are you well, Mom?" I responded with equal brevity, "I'm fine. Hope you are too." That small exchange opened a narrow channel of communication. Over the following days, my mother began sending occasional messages, never mentioning the conflict, never asking for anything, just small updates about her garden or questions about the weather in Phoenix. I responded cautiously, maintaining my boundaries while leaving room for this new tentative connection to develop. I didn't ask about my father or Jessica, and she didn't volunteer information. It was as if we were feeling our way toward a different kind of relationship, one not defined by the old patterns. 4 weeks after the confrontation, Uncle Robert called with unexpected news. "Jessica's enrolled in Gamblers Anonymous," he said, without preamble when I answered. Really, I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Really. She reached out to me last week, asked for help finding resources. I connected her with a good program in Chicago. She's been to 3 meetings so far. That's great," I said, genuinely pleased, but wary of getting my hopes up. Jessica had started and abandoned numerous self-improvement efforts over the years. "There's more," Uncle Robert continued. "Your father called me yesterday, asked for business advice." This was even more surprising. My father's pride had always prevented him from seeking help, especially from his younger brother. What kind of advice? How to restructure his debt, scale down, operations, salvage what he can of the business. Uncle Robert paused. "He didn't mention you directly, but he did say something about recognizing unsustainable patterns, Coming from Thomas, that's practically a revelation. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe this represented real change, while another part remembered all the previous false starts and broken promises. "What do you think?" I finally asked. "Is it genuine?" "Hard to say," Uncle Robert admitted. "But it's the first time in 40 years I've heard your father acknowledge he might need to change anything about himself. That counts for something." The following Sunday, I received a text from my mother that was different from her previous messages. "Your father asked me to tell you he's sorry. He's not ready to say it himself yet, but he wanted you to know." It wasn't a direct apology, and it certainly didn't address the full scope of what had happened. But it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever received from my father before. I shared the message with Allison during our Sunday dinner. "What do you think it means?" I asked her, as we sat on my patio enjoying grilled salmon and a bottle of wine. "I think it means your boundaries are working," she replied thoughtfully. "For the first time, they're having to confront the consequences of their behavior, instead of having you absorb them." "Do you think real change is possible? For them, I mean." Allison considered the question seriously before answering. "I think it's possible, but it won't be quick or easy. They've spent decades in these patterns. Changing them will take time, effort, and probably professional help." "And what if they don't change?" I asked, voicing my lingering fear. "Then you'll have the life you're building now," she said, gesturing around us. "Friends who respect you, work you enjoy, a relationship based on mutual support rather than exploitation." She reached across the table and took my hand. "A future that belongs to you, not to your family's problems." 6 weeks after the confrontation, I returned home from work to find an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a check for $14,000, the exact amount I'd paid to cover Jessica's defaulted car loan years ago, and a handwritten note that simply said, "A. Start, J." I sat on my front step staring at the check and note for a long time. It wasn't just about the money, though, that validation wasn't insignificant. It was about recognition, acknowledgement that what had happened was wrong, that my feelings mattered, that my boundaries deserved respect. That night, I sent Jessica a text. "Got your letter. Thank you." Her response came quickly. 90 days sober from gambling, one day at a time. It was the first direct communication we'd had since the confrontation, and it felt like the beginning of something new, not the old relationship restored, which wouldn't have been healthy for either of us, but the possibility of building something different, something based on mutual respect rather than dependency. The following week, I received an email from my father. Brief and formal, but significant. "Brad, I've been working with a financial advisor to restructure my business. Would appreciate your input on the technology aspects of our new operational plan, if you're willing. No pressure. Dad." It wasn't an explicit apology, but from my father, asking for help, rather than demanding it, represented a seismic shift. I agreed to review his plans, making it clear that my involvement would be advisory only with no financial entanglements. 2 months after the confrontation that I'd feared would end my family relationships forever, we were finding our way towards something new, something healthier, more balanced, built on respect rather than exploitation. It wasn't perfect, and there were still difficult conversations ahead, but for the first time I felt hopeful that change was possible. 6 months passed, bringing changes I never would have imagined during those intense days of confrontation and discovery. My relationship with my family had transformed, not into some perfect, conflict-free ideal, but into something more authentic and balanced than I'd ever experienced before. My promotion to lead developer came through bringing additional responsibilities, but also greater creative control over projects and a substantial salary increase. The financial security I'd worked so hard to achieve was finally a reality, allowing me to build the life I wanted, rather than constantly responding to crises. The biggest change in my personal life came on a hiking trip to Sedona with Allison. At the summit of Cathedral Rock, with the red rocks glowing in the sunset light, I asked her to marry me. Her immediate yes and radiant smile marked the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. "I never thought I'd find someone who makes me feel both completely accepted and constantly inspired to grow," I told her, as we celebrated that evening. That's how healthy relationships should feel, she replied, her engagement ring catching the candlelight. Not like you're constantly being drained, but like you're being filled up. My family's journey toward healthier dynamics continued with both progress and occasional backsliding. Jessica maintained her commitment to recovery, celebrating 6 months without gambling. She had found a full-time position as an administrative assistant at a local community college, which provided more stability than her previous retail jobs. Most surprisingly, she had purchased a used Toyota with a reasonable payment plan that she managed herself, no cosigners, no family loans. When she sent me a picture of herself with the car, her pride was evident not just in her smile but in the message that accompanied it. Bought it myself. Within my budget. Still making payments on time. My father's business had undergone significant restructuring. He'd sold his commercial office space, downsized his staff, and focused on a narrower segment of the market where his experience gave him an advantage. The business was smaller but more sustainable, and for perhaps the first time in his adult life, he was living within his means rather than constantly leveraging himself for the appearance of greater success. Our professional relationship had developed in unexpected ways. What began as occasional advice about technology solutions for his business had evolved into regular consultations. He valued my expertise in a way he never had before, and I found myself appreciating his decades of business experience when not overshadowed by financial manipulation. My mother had perhaps changed the least outwardly, still preferring harmony to conflict, still sometimes enabling problematic behaviors. But even she had begun setting small boundaries, like refusing to lend Jessica money when asked and encouraging my father to discuss business problems directly with me rather than having her mediate. 3 months after the confrontation, we attempted our first family dinner, not at my parents' house with all its loaded history, but at a neutral restaurant halfway between Phoenix and Chicago during a weekend when we all happened to be in Denver for a cousin's wedding. The conversation was cautious at first, carefully avoiding potential triggers. But as the meal progressed, Jessica surprised everyone by addressing the elephant in the room. "I need to say something," she announced during a lull between courses. "What I did, what we all did to Brad, was wrong. I've been working on making amends as part of my recovery, and this is an important one." She turned to me directly. "I'm sorry for trying to use your credit, for taking advantage of your responsibility, for never considering how my actions affected you. I can't change the past, but I'm committed to doing better going forward." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions. My father stared at his plate. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, and I felt a complex mixture of validation, relief, and cautious hope. "Thank you," I finally said. "That means a lot to me." The conversation that followed wasn't easy, but it was perhaps the most honest exchange our family had ever had. We established new ground rules for our interactions. No discussions of loans or financial assistance, respect for each other's boundaries, and a commitment to honesty even when difficult. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, my father pulled me aside. "I'm not good at this sort of thing," he began awkwardly. "Admitting mistakes. But your Uncle Robert helped me see some things more clearly. The way I treated you, the way I taught Jessica to treat you, it wasn't right." He cleared his throat. "I'm trying to do better." Coming from my father, this halting acknowledgement was equivalent to a profound apology. I nodded, accepting it for what it was, not perfect, but sincere. "I know, Dad. I see that." In the months that followed, we built a new kind of family relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. Our interactions became less frequent but more meaningful. Sunday dinners were replaced by monthly video calls where we genuinely caught up on each other's lives, rather than performing the old rituals of manipulation and resentment. The ripple effects of these changes extended beyond my immediate family. When my cousin Tyler faced pressure to co-sign a loan for his brother, a situation eerily similar to my own, he called me for advice. "How did you know when to say no?" he asked. "How did you find the courage?" I shared my experience, and the lessons I'd learned, that true support sometimes means refusing to enable destructive patterns, that real love includes respect for boundaries, that financial entanglement often damages relationships rather than strengthening them. "It won't be easy," I warned him. They'll probably react the way my family did at first: anger, guilt trips, accusations of disloyalty. But if the relationship has value beyond what you can provide financially, it will survive and potentially become healthier. Tyler ultimately declined to co-sign the loan inspired by my example, to break the pattern of financial exploitation in his branch of the family as well. His brother was initially furious, but eventually found a more affordable solution that didn't require putting Tyler's credit at risk. As Allison and I planned our wedding, we made conscious decisions about family involvement that reflected our new boundaries. My parents would be invited and welcomed, but given none of the control they might have expected in the past. Jessica would be included but not given responsibilities that might trigger her gambling issues like managing vendor payments. Most importantly, we were building our marriage on a foundation of financial transparency and mutual respect, learning from the negative examples I'd grown up with, and intentionally creating something healthier. 6 months to the day after the confrontation that I'd feared would destroy my family forever, I sat on my patio with Allison, watching the sunset and reflecting on how much had changed. I never would have predicted this outcome, I admitted. I thought setting boundaries would end my relationship with my family. Instead, it transformed it into something I never knew was possible. That's often how it works, Allison replied. Healthy boundaries don't prevent connection. They make genuine connection possible by replacing exploitation with respect. The journey hadn't been easy, and I knew we still had challenging moments ahead. Real change doesn't happen overnight, and old patterns have a way of reasserting themselves during times of stress. But for the first time in my life, I felt truly free, not from my family, but from the destructive dynamics that had defined our relationships for decades. I had learned that saying no wasn't selfish, but sometimes the most caring thing I could do for myself and for those who needed to find their own strength. I had discovered that true family support meant encouraging growth and independence, not perpetuating dependency. And perhaps most importantly, I had found that my worth wasn't defined by what I could provide to others, but by who I was as a person. That night, as Allison and I planned our future together, a future based on partnership rather than exploitation, on mutual support rather than one-sided sacrifice, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the difficult journey that had brought me to this place of greater authenticity and peace. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family or friends? What did you learn from the experience? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Your support means everything. And remember, standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for building healthy relationships that stand the test of time. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and clarity on your own journey toward authentic connections.